What's going on, guys, and welcome to week 4 of the Central District podcast here. I'm not in my studio regularly. I'm in a studio that I do for broadcasting for high school sporting events this week. But with that being said, week 3 was really interesting when it came to games and teams. We kind of got to see what some teams were really made out of and what some teams were still questioning on. It's going to be very interesting to see as district play starts tonight. And I'm going to break down those 4 matchups that we have for the teams that are playing tonight and the other teams that will be playing next week as well. Before I jump into the district matchups of the week, let's go ahead and recap the week's worth of games, and starting with Vincennes. The 11th ranked Trailblazers finished with an 83-80 win over the visiting Henry Ford on Wednesday after the Division II Hawks staged off a furious late-game rally where they were down by as many as 17 points and just missed sending the contest into overtime. The Hawks came back from, like I said, 17 points and almost tied the game at a buzzer from 40 feet out. Caleb Johnson scored his 14 of his team-high 19 points for the Trailblazers, while 4 others tallied double figures. Cale Gather with 15, Shiloh Jackson with 13, Michael Osei-Bonsu with 12, and Chris King with 10 off the bench. Jackson and King shared double figures with 11 and 10 rebounds, respectively, while Bonsu, fighting foul trouble again, still was able to grab 9 boards. VU continued to play ranked opponents when they hosted Danville area. They won this game a little bit more convincingly, 73-65. Kent King had his best game as a Blazer, 17 points off the bench, and was a perfect 8 from 8 from the charity stripe. Again, Michael Osei-Bonsu finished with 8 points, but had big baskets when it looked like the Jaguars were going to make a run in the game. Cale Gather also had 15 points, and Caleb Johnson had 17, while he shot 5 of 10 from the floor. Vincennes will play Kaskaskia November 22nd and Volunteer State November 26th. It's going to be very interesting to see what these Blazers are going to be able to do, especially against Kaskaskia tonight. Let's go ahead and talk about the Kaskaskia Blue Devils as they're coming into the game against Vincennes 8-0 as well. Kaskaskia got their 6th straight win to open up the season with a huge 120-61 win against Greenville JV last Monday night. Jackson Hare led the Blue Devils, who had 7 players in double figures with 21 points. He was 10 of 15 shooting from the field. Xavier Jackson added 20, with Jalen Petty adding 17 and Ezek Dawson adding 15. Emmanuel Prosper added 14 as well. Kaskaskia as a team was white hot, shooting 54 of 88 from the field. Then the road trips continued for Coach Hancock, and it was another victory against Oakland City University, this time a little bit tighter. It was 92-82. Petty was in double digits again for Kaskaskia and led all scorers with 31 points and shot 11 and 19 from the field. He also had 12 rebounds. And again, the Blue Devils had all 5 starters in double digits, and they led the game at the half, 43-40. So it's going to be very interesting to see. They got 2 big wins against JV teams. The final win of the week came while the Blue Devils traveled to southeastern Illinois for a rematch of a couple weeks ago against the Falcons, and they beat them again. But this one was a lot tighter, 190 win. Jahi R. Jones led the way with 34 points, and Petty finished his week again in double figures. He finished with 16. I'll get more into this in the breakdown, but Kaskaskia going 8-0 against Vincennes 8-0, it's going to be interesting to see who comes out with the first loss of the year. We're seeing what the Trailblazers are really made out of, and we're starting to see what the Statesmen are made out of. Let's go to another team that is kind of a wild card, I'll call them, for the time being, and that is going to be the Shawnee Saints. Shawnee is on a winning streak of their own. After losing their opening game against Columbia State, the Saints have won 3 in a row, with their latest being a 92-87 win against Tennessee Prep. A.K. Hazley scored 31, but only shot 9 of 20 from the field. He did have 10 rebounds, though. Miles Lemon added 14 points while Ashton Young finished with 12. Again, a team like Shawnee and a team like I'll cover next in Lewis and Clark, only playing a few games going into district play. It's going to be interesting to see if this is their legit team, the 3-0 team, or is it going to be the team that showed up against Columbia State? It's going to be very difficult to decide, especially since they've only played 4 games heading into district play. With that being said, they have one game again this week, but it's a district game, and that is going to be the Trailblazers of Lewis and Clark, and that is at Lewis and Clark tonight. So it's going to be very interesting to see if the Saints can come out and get a road win. Road wins are very rare when it comes to district play. Another team that has started to turn into a wild card, I'll call them, is going to be the SWIC Blue Storm, as they lost their only game of the week to Moberly area 70-62. Jacquees Franklin came off the bench and shot 7 of 12 from the field and 3 of 6 behind the arc, finishing with 19 points for the Blue Storm. The only other starter in double figures, however, was Nora Courtney, who had 15 points and 6 rebounds. As a team, the Blue Storm shot a measly 33% from the floor, 22 of 66. But the Greyhounds of Moberly area was able to shoot 47.4, 27 of 57 from the floor, and that was the biggest difference in the game. Again, SWIC comes off with their second loss of the year. They're 3-2 heading into district play. They'll face Lakeland, and then they'll play Fort Scott on November 25th and Walter State in November 26th. So the Blue Storm have a home field advantage, I'll call it, because it's very hard to play in Belleville. And the Lakers, as we're going to talk about here shortly, they're another wild card. It's going to be very interesting to see how that game turns out tonight. Let's go ahead and go to Robinson, Illinois, and take on the Lincoln Trail Statesmen, who have been riding a hot wave as of late after starting 0-2. They picked up their biggest win to date with a 71-51 win against the Cardinals of Mineral area on Wednesday. All 4 players were in double figures, with Nick Kegler at 18 and shot 7-11 from the floor. Malik Reese had a double-double with 10 points, 10 rebounds. Greg Jennings had 13 points and 3 assists. The final Statesman that was in double figures was Clint Wycliffe, who had 15 points. It was 6 of 11 from the field. Trail had 9 players in double figures, with Chris Felix Jr., who had 14, Josh Tyler, 14, Nick Hagler, 12, Craig Jennings, 11, Jesse Lassiter, 11, Malik Reese, 10, B.J. Smith, 10, and Quint Rickliff had 10, and Caden Hunlocker had 10 in their 121-49 win against Bresca JV on Friday night. Trail, like I said, they started the year 0-2. Now they're 5-2, running a 5-game win streak, with that big win against Mineral area really sticking out to me. They got 3 games this week, none of them district play, but they're going to play very tough opponents. Wren Lake, Division II, but they are in the GRAC, so that's going to be a conference game for the Statesmen. So can't ever count Wren Lake out with that. Then they play Bryant and Stratton on November 25th, and finally Southeastern Iowa on November 26th. Southeastern is a very dangerous ball club, as they just knocked off the previous number 1 team in Northwest Florida State. Let's go ahead and talk about those Lakers. They lost to Division II Danville area 79-60. Boy, that was a whooping on their own home floor. Lakeland had 3 players in double figures, with Dallas Cox, 14 points, Amir Kujalet, 14 points as well, and Arnaldo Camucho had 12. Cox shot 6 of 14 from the field. As a whole, the Lakers only shot 31.7 from the field, including 6 of 24 from 3. If they were able to get a couple more 3-point shots to go in, it would have been a closer game. I still think Danville, especially with the way they played against Vincennes, it was going to be very hard for the Lakers to come out with a win on that. But it would not have been the 19-point blowout that it was. However, they were able to bounce back and edge out Parkland 73-66. Aaron Davis finished with 13 points. Camucho and Anthony Neal added 10 off the bench. Again, they play SWIC tonight. It's going to be very, very difficult for Lakeland because, like I said, Belleville is very hard to play in. the teams that I had when I was with the Trailblazers, we even struggled against Belleville in Belleville. So SWIC has the home field advantage for that, and I'll break that down a little bit more when we get to the matchups. Other games this week for the Lakers, they'll be in that same style or same classic that who is it? Let me see. They'll be in the same classic as Lincoln Trail, and so they'll face Southeastern on November 25th and Bryant and Stratton on November 26th. So again, Lakeland will be able to see what Lincoln Trail is able to do a little bit, but again, tough opponent against Southeastern Iowa because they knocked off Florida Northwest, and Bryant and Stratton are coming up as a good team as well this year. It's going to be that is a very difficult holiday classic to play in this year. Talking about teams that traveled this week, let's go ahead and talk about the Wabash Valley Warriors. They had to go up to Chicago for 2 games, and they came away with 2 wins. First, they played the host school, Richard Daly, and won that game 81-63. Jacoby Hetty scored 17 of his team-high 19 points in the first half. Gary Clay netted 15 points as well, and Trevion Trace scored 11 for the Warriors, who improved to 5-1 at that point. Wabash was able to defeat Harry S. Truman. Again, that was a rematch game from last week when they played down in Mount Carmel. This game, again, was really close. It was 68-62. Garrett Clay scored 22 points for the Warriors, while Jacoby Hetty had 18. As, like I said, the Warriors beat the Bulldogs again, but this one was a lot closer. It was played in Chicago, so Truman had a little bit of extra grit to them. And when you see a team like that in back-to-back weeks, it's very hard to duplicate your output that you had from the week before. So the fact that the Warriors were able to travel on the road and get that win says a lot to me what these Warriors are going to be all about. They're high-flying again this year, not as high-flying as they have been in years past, but they're still high flyers. It's going to be very interesting to see as they go to Carterville to take on the Logan Volunteers this week. That's their only game of the week. It's a district game, it's a rivalry game, and it's a conference game. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see if they can go down to Carterville and pick up a win. You know, I was just talking about the Lewis and Clark Trailblazers. Let's go ahead and dive into their recap of the game that they had against St. Louis Community College. Again, only one game last week. Very hard to see what these Trailblazers are made out of. They lost that game 91-84. Nuwan Peterson buried 5 trays for the Trailblazers, however, and led all scorers in the game with 28 points. Armand Williams added 18 himself, while Jeff Daniels added 12, and LT White scored 11 points. Again, they lost the game 91-84, first loss of the season. Only 3 games to their belt as they're going into the game against Shawnee. It's going to be very... Lewis and Clark is the complete wild card here. They can be very, very good, or they can just be the Lewis and Clark teams that I have known in the past. Who knows what these Trailblazer team is really going to be out of, and it's going to be very interesting to see, especially tonight when they take on the Saints of Shawnee. So let's go ahead and talk about the Volunteers of John A. Logan. They only played 1 game this week, but it was against a ranked Triton team who had just played the night previously. Logan won that game 61-50 and was led by Kurt Lewis, who shot 4 of 6 from the field. It was 2 of 3 from behind the arc. He finished with 12 points. Kamari Peterson also led the Vols, but with 7 assists. He was 5 of 10 from the field and added 11 points. And actually, that game is not going to be in Carterville. That's going to be at Mount Carmel. So, again, when I go into this breakdown, it's going to be, that might change things on how the Warriors play against the Vols, but that's going to be very interesting to see. Again, they play Wabash Valley tonight, only game of the week. It's a rivalry, it's a conference game, and it's the opening for district play. Going to be very interesting to see those 2 teams. And last but not least, let's go ahead and wrap up this recap of the week. Olney Central. They played, like I said, they played Triton the previous day, so they played them on Wednesday night. Marshawn Dickerson led the Knights with 25 points and hit 5 threes. And Darian Lewis had 16. Two other Knights added 11 points, but it wasn't enough as Triton was able to squeak away from Olney and get that one down there. Deshaun Sims and Kevin Gilstrap were the other two Knights in double figures there. OCC was able to jump their record 4-2 with a 90-65 win against Nebraska JV. Dickerson again led the way for the team with adding 14 points, while JT Thomas also had 14. Sims had 13, and Gilstrap was in double figures with 10 again. The final night with double digits was Tanner Blankford, who had 10 as well. And so they will not play a district team this week. They only have one game. It's going to be Wednesday. It's going to be tomorrow night as they take on the Falcons of Southeastern Illinois College. Again, not Southeastern Illinois has dropped down to a club-level team. So it is not going to be an NJCAA game for them. It's not. They used to be in this region, and it used to be a conference game, so that's why they're still playing Southeastern Illinois. Olney comes in at 4-2. It's going to be very interesting to see what they can do against the Falcons of Southeastern Illinois. They get an extra day of rest. They get to see kind of what these teams do to each other, as they will be off tonight, and so they'll be able to watch some film on the other games that are going on tonight. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into tonight's matchups. And let's go ahead and start with the most wild card game of it all, and that's going to be Lewis and Clark versus Shawnee. Team that's only played 3 games this year against a team that's only played 4 games this year. But the competition that Shawnee has faced has been a little bit better than the competition that Lewis and Clark have faced. But I will say that the Trailblazers don't look like a team of old, at least not when I was watching them, when I was in the district at the time. They're more composed than they have been in the past. And again, they're riding that upset win last year. So some of these guys that came back from a year ago that are now playing this year, they're looking to have a winning record in the district, get a higher seed than that 9 or 10 seed that they have always been historically in the past. While Shawnee looks to improve from their tremendous season a year ago. Again, they've been injured earlier this year. I don't know if they're healthier now. It seems like they are getting on the mend there. So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and go with the Saints of Shawnee, but really that's a toss-up game to me. I mentioned it in the recaps for both these teams, so let's go ahead and talk about the game in Belleville. SWIC versus Lakeland tonight. I can see this going very, very well for SWIC. Just mainly because it's on their home floor. They get a little bit of advantage there. Again, Lakeland got blown out against Danville area. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. Danville area is a very scrappy team. They're going to win 20-plus games this year. They'll probably make a deep run in the Division II tournament. It's just, for me, the fact that Lakeland didn't show up to that game, and while SWIC did lose their game against Moberly area, that game was closer and against a higher form of competition. Again, nothing against the Jags of Danville area, just Moberly area, who was only a couple years removed from the National Tournament Elite Eight. I mean, we're talking about very high-grade competition here. Coaches know what they're doing. So SWIC going in 3-2 against Lakeland, even though the Lakers have the better record, I will go ahead and go with SWIC in this ballgame. Another game that I think is going to be very, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this game goes down, is the Wabash versus Logan game. I mean, both these teams going into tonight have played high level of competition. Wabash is able to come out of this at 6-1, while Logan is 4-2. But Logan's played more ranked teams. Again, that's nothing against Wabash. Logan has really loaded up their front half of the month, playing all those ranked teams. Northeast Mississippi, Macomb. Then you had Triton, you had Indian Hills, you had Three Rivers. Those games, my goodness, that got that team battle-tested and ready to go. Is it going to be enough when they travel to Mount Carmel to take on the Warriors in a hostile environment? That's where I'm not 100% sure of. If Isaiah Stafford comes to play for the Vols and is able to help be a leader on that team that he has shown glimpses of, I think Logan comes away and comes out with a win. If he played like he has the last couple games and Coach Smith-Peters has to rely on other players to become that leader, who knows? Because Wabash is a stacked team with Jacoby Hetty and Trevion Trace. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this game comes up, and I'm looking forward to this game of the night. Obviously not as excited as I am for the game with Vincennes and Kaskaskia. Kaskaskia comes in scoring over 100 points per game. They come in 8-0. Vincennes comes in with one of the toughest defenses as a team, and they come in 8-0. I think it's going to come down to the grit of the team. And this might sound like I'm a homer for Vincennes because I went there. But I'm trying to stay as balanced as I can with this breakdown. And again, Coach Hancock has some good players on that team. And if Vincennes doesn't show up to this game, if they show up like they did against Henry Ford, they'll get hit in the mouth. And they'll lose this ball game. End of story. Because Jackson Hare, Zeke Dawson, and Jalen Petty will put up points on you. They will. They can do it. They've shown that they can do it at this level so far. Now, granted, they've been playing lesser competition. But if you don't show up, especially since this is a road game for you, your first road test, if you don't show up to this game, you will get hit in the mouth and you will start this district 0-1. Counterpoint to that. If they show up, if Vincennes shows up to this game, and they play like how Coach Franklin has tried to teach them how to play and how they played against Northeast Mississippi, this will be a blowout the other way. Because if Vincennes is able to play the way that Coach Franklin wants them to play, which is grit, get the ball down, chin it when you get the rebound, turn, fire, look for the open shot. Kaskaskia is going to give you those open shots and play tough defense that Kaskaskia, frankly, hasn't seen yet this year. You'll win this ball game. It's going to be very interesting to see because both of you guys are coming in at 8-0. Vincennes has all the national recognition right now. They're number 8 in the country. You don't think that's a craw or that's not a thorn in Coach Hancock's side right now? Because they're 8-0 too. Why aren't they ranked? Why aren't they in the receiving votes category? In any poll that I saw today, they're not mentioned at all. Why is that? So if Vincennes shows up, this is a big win for Vincennes, especially since it's their first road game of the season. If they don't show up, they're going to get hit in the mouth. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens tonight. That's going to do it for this week's ball games. Again, Lincoln Trail and Olney don't have competition or don't play district opponents this week, so they get to see the other 8 teams kind of beat up on each other a little bit. But really, it's going to be a very fun week of games. Again, Vincennes has another game after their district game. They'll play November 26th against Volunteer State. Lincoln Trail, once again, they play at Rend Lake. Then they'll play Brighton Stratton and at Southeastern over Thanksgiving break. And that's another big thing for all these teams. it's Thanksgiving week. It's going to be very hard to play tough, knowing that you have that break coming soon. So, like I said, Lincoln Trail plays Rend Lake, Brighton, Stratton in southeastern Iowa. Shawnee, they play Lewis and Clark, then they're off for the rest of the week. SWIC, after they play Lakeland, they'll play in a Thanksgiving Classic against Fort Scott and Walters State. So, very tough game for those guys as well. Lewis and Clark, they only have one game against Shawnee, then they're off before they play Vincennes in the Battle of the Trailblazers. Kaskaskia has Vincennes, and then they're off. Like I said, this is a light week because you have Thanksgiving on Thursday. So a lot of these guys only play the one game tonight. Wabash only has Logan tonight. Lakeland, they have SWIC tonight. Then they'll face Southeastern and Brighton and Stratton in their holiday tournament. Logan only has Wabash Valley tonight. Olney Central has Southeastern Illinois tomorrow, November 23rd. So like I said, with Thanksgiving being thrown in the middle of the week, it kind of throws off coaches' game plans on how they practice, because you want to allow those guys to rest up and enjoy the time with their families, but at the same time, you're just getting started into that grind of playing every other day. And some of these schools, like Vincennes and Kaskaskia, who have 8 games under their belt already, those players' legs are tired. And Vincennes plays Saturday, so it's going to be very interesting to see how tired they are tonight and how tired they are Saturday, especially with Thanksgiving thrown in between. But with that being said, that's going to do it for this episode. Again, I'm in my studio for high school basketball broadcasting. I will be back in my home studio next week, hopefully. But until then, I will see you next time.